continued during the conversations within the panels, and that now we are going to take again all these inspirations, ideas, feelings, experiences of our being here, bridging voices, or at least thinking about what it means for us and how we can do that together. So this idea that the organizers have about have a continuity in our dialogue, it's interesting, but it's challenging for all of us. It's demanding because it is based on what is happening right now and not in what we prepared to discuss. But we have a certain structure. So the certainty was that after the keynote of John yesterday and Catherine today, we could reply first for today, John, then Professor Dr. Rosalba, and then the public, the audience, the we, no, here. But I want to propose you right now that we change a little bit this idea, because I think what emerged right now, even for me, makes that it is not necessary to be seated here in front, so we can continue the conversation from the same place that we are right now together. And we'll see how we can discuss and try to engage in the debate. What we had yesterday was a presentation from John, sharing with us his own position, his own reflection about what means for him bridging. And we maybe could perceive, maybe just to get a general idea of where he was situated or with questions. And I think the same today, with a different experience, with different place, we maybe perceive that we have a different background, different reflection about what is be a bridge or building bridges, what is development. The point is that the rest, we are in between, no? In a certain way now, today. What we can try to do, when I express that it's fear, what I feel sometimes, now I can connect it with what I'm feeling right now. Because we have two of the paradigms, ways of thinking about how to create knowledge and how to create knowledge with others. And they come from different traditions. And they come from different places. And the people who are here, we are struggling with that during our journeys in doing research. So maybe we are right now full of questions, full of, I am close to John's position in a certain ways. I like this. I connect my research experience with this. But then listening to Catherine and say, oh, what is this, no? No, it's like I can connect here with very important aspects. But were in silence yesterday. But here there are other silences. If I try to move from the other side of the bridge. So what if we start just from the rest, the audience, sharing how we experience these two secure places. I put in secure, is not properly secure, but two of you are grounded and convinced about your place of creating knowledge. And you are doing political positions, very different, the two of you. John says, exactly, yeah. So let's debate how we perceive, how can we navigate between these paradigms? Can we try to give or to offer to ourselves right now kind of materials to build a new bridge for us in this second debate? What are the limitations and what are the possibilities that trying to move between these secure places can or could we have? So I'm just giving you right now the mic. I think I'm in my PhD journey also struggling with this, as many of us, I guess. And let's talk about it. And let's talk how the new generations are trying to create bridges between paradigms. And what are the challenges, the fears, the frustrations, the hopes that we already are working with. So who wants to start? Sorry, then maybe we can go back to John and then to Catherine and Rosalba.
Hello everyone, my name is Juan Carlos Triviño. I'm PhD candidate in Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona. I'm originally from Colombia, and actually I found Professor Cameron's and Professor Walsh on conference very stimulating. And about what you were mentioning before, about the importance of combining these paradigms. Now I'm in a position of being like in a whole mess, you know, like, because I don't know where to stand right now. I mean, something that for me was very interesting is what John said yesterday about subjectivity, about putting your own subjectivity in your research. I mean, you cannot detach that part. And actually, now that today you were talking about the importance of this exchange, this two-way direction, I'm thinking like also the problem of mainstreaming everything. You know, like in the academia, we have to detach from subjectivity, we have to be mainstream, we have to use the big names in order to create knowledge. So it's this combination that is quite tricky and it's quite difficult, you know, that sometimes to leave it aside. Actually, now that, well, we are talking about subjectivity, I'm going to bring my own subjectivity to my point. And is that I remember when I was a child in Colombia, and the first trip that I did abroad, it was to Costa Rica. And it was the first time that I was in a McDonald's, actually. And I was thinking, well, in Colombia, we don't have McDonald's. It's a pity. You know, it's so bad that we don't have McDonald's in Colombia. You know, and I was so happy when I saw the first McDonald's in my city, you know. So for Latin Americans, this bridge is a one-direction bridge towards the north, you know, and it's so sad that I mean, now that I'm, you know, like an adult and everything, and I see that how silly this vision is, that we don't appreciate what we have, what we are, our roots. We don't appreciate our own knowledge. And now that you were mentioning all the experience that you have in Ecuador, and all these progressive governments that are happening in Latin America since the end of the 1990s. And I was thinking that that's another issue, that's another thing that discursively is so interesting, so fascinating what all these governments are proposing, but in practice you see that they are replicating these tendencies that existed before, these dynamics of exclusion and inclusion, and they are creating new elites of domination in our countries. So, I mean, putting all this together, I think that the learning that I get from all this is that we have to build bridges of exchange to directional bridges, that we can find points of encounter in the middle of the bridge, where we have to work together to build this bridge. It's not one direction. It's not that we have to aim to this space or this place as we know the global north. No, it's an exchange between both sides, but from respect and commitment. And thank you.
Thank you. So I'm also feeling the same way as Juan. It's a mess now. There are lots of things going on in my head. First of all, I'm an anthropologist wannabe. I'm starting my study in anthropology, and my interest is Southeast Asia and Indonesia, where I come from. Well, since my interest is there, I feel like, okay, logically, if I want to write and I want to know more about that region, I should be there. Like that's the source of my knowledge I need to really take into account in my study. But in order to my degree, my knowledge, and what I'm gonna produce is legitimate, I have to fly to Europe. How many Indonesian PhD here studying about Indonesia, yet they have to fly to the motherland here and studying in ISS? So it's like, in order, like you were talking about local knowledge and like all this diversity, yet it has to be framed in a Western way in order for it to be accepted, legitimate, and in order for it to be to have like larger audience. So that's my first confusion, and how, even though we realized what your colleague in Duke probably call it like the colonial matrix of power, Walter Mindolo, but how do we de-linked from that? I mean, like really, like just realizing that it exists doesn't mean that we already, do what's necessary. And my second question is like, well, when you were talking about the Inter-American Court, you were talking about how they start taking into account the way people perceive what rights are, and like taking into account their behavior and how they see things around them. And one word that came into my mind was the considerations of culture. And I think that's bad, that the word that is in my head is culture, because I think the word has been like used and abused in a lot of ways, where it's, they homogenize people and justify how people treat certain kind of people in a group, like imaginary group. I also want to ask you, like, in the colonial thinking and colonial study, where does this word stand? So, yeah, thank you.
Recording, just for the sake of.
So I have one comment about my own bridge experience. I'm coming from Turkey, and bridge for me wasn't especially a nice thing. I mean, literally having a bridge connecting the Asian and the European continents. I mean, Turkey has been, the bridge between the East and the West, which, always like, okay, I hate hearing about this anymore. So it is not always a nice metaphor as well. What I was thinking from your talk, and thank you, it was really nice, about what you told about the Inter-American course taking into account the customary law. I mean, I was thinking about what are the conditions when the powerful, those gatekeepers, those who do not allow those bridges to be constructed or to be crossed over, when and under what conditions they do allow that. I mean, how come the Inter-American Courts in the end accepted that kind of customary law? And I feel like there is still, you know, you see the power at the end. In the end, the ones setting the limits are the powerful ones. Like in the Constitution or in the development plan of Ecuador, you see the nature has rights, but when it is in national interest, it is the state who is going to decide. I feel like this national interest and then the nation state, that the nation state represents the good of the people, is a very fundamental contradiction now in Ecuador. Like, yeah, we need to produce gold, oil, whatever to help the others. Yeah, at the local level, there's going to be some impacts, but you know, for the greater good, we need to have that. I think that's very powerful, and it is not very easy to go against that argument, and especially if the government is actually redistributing and actually doing something. So what is your comment? I mean, how the power and under what conditions the powerful actors are actually more open, or what can we do to this? Oh, okay, I'm working in Ecuador. I know.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. For me, I will narrow down to my specific country, Uganda. Actually, from the discussion so far, I'm a bit confused. To begin with, I have a short story. When we were in upper primary, the teacher asked us who discovered the source of the Nile. The Nile is the longest river that flows from Uganda to the Mediterranean Sea. And one of the students wrote the answer that the people who first drew water from the river. And he got it wrong, because the right answer was John Speke, the British. But this kid asked, when did John Speke come to Uganda? And the answer was around late 17th century. And the kid asked the teacher, don't you think before he came, even before he was born, there were some people who were drawing water from the river who saw it before? And I think the problem was now discovering. So from there, when I came here, my interest was, my research interest was in the area of, poverty, participation, and my professor told me how he knew much about Kampala, and we shared a lot. I realized that actually he knew Kampala, which is the capital city of Uganda, better than myself, who comes from Uganda. So if we say that knowledge is created in the north, perhaps I tend to agree. People outside have come to know much about us. And leaving that aside, I'm wondering, there is a conflict between knowledge production and policy, and how this knowledge actually is put into practice, is accepted by policymakers to help change society. Knowledge is produced, but is shelved and gathers dust. If the policy-making body is informed about what to do, it is challenged. The process is too political. And therefore, it has not translated to development. And another thing I've been wondering, in this globalized environment, a lot has been done in terms of knowledge production. When Makerere University, my best university and one of the best universities in Africa, is trying to produce a toy car, another university, perhaps Massachusetts Institute of Technology, is thinking of space technology. So will this knowledge that my university is producing really relevant today? Should it waste time in producing this knowledge? Or it should wait upon this knowledge that is already produced? After all, we're in a globalized environment, it's spread so fast. Our population in Uganda, 30% perhaps, do not know that actually taking unsafe water causes diarrhea or typhoid. So isn't it more important to sensitize these people about how to live a healthy life, rather than burying myself into this sort of knowledge production where I feel I'm not even going to make a big difference? I'm really puzzled. Thank you.
Juliana. Yes, sí. Rosalba will help me with translation. Okay, thank you, Rosalba. I am Juliana. I am from Colombia and Venezuela too. Quisiera comentar 3 cosas. Pues una, voy parando, ¿no?
I want to talk to you about 3 different things. The first one.
Okay. Cuando decimos puentear, yo pienso en Gloria Anzaldúa, por eso agradezco en el feminismo chicano, por eso agradezco que la hayas mencionado. This bridge we call home, es maravilloso.
First of all, when I think about bridging, I immediately think about Gloria Anzaldúa, a very well-known Chicana. This means Mexican-American origin feminist in the US, so I'm very grateful that she was mentioned during the lecture.
Okay. Lo segundo, con relación a deseo, colonización, perdón, y subjetividad. Para mí la clave es el deseo, voy a decir por qué.
The second issue is that in relation to subjectivity and coloniality, for me the key question there is desire. And I'm going to tell you why for me this is the key issue.
Yes. Para entenderlo tenemos que superar la idea de la subjetividad como un punto de vista privado, ¿no? Y opuesto a la objetividad.
First of all, we need to understand subjectivity beyond the private sphere, or in opposition to objectivity.
Yes, an opposition to it. Okay. Si entendemos la subjetividad como el cruce complejo entre agencia, poder y deseo, podemos avanzar. Y ahorita digo por qué.
If we understand subjectivity as a crossing between power,
agency and
desire.
Okay. ¿Por qué podemos avanzar? Porque podemos entender cómo funciona la colonización y cómo podemos desafiarnos en términos de colonizarnos. Lo colonizado es el deseo.
If we understand that power, desire, and which was the other one? ¿Cuál fue la otra? Now that subjectivity is a crossing between power,
agency
and desire. Okay. And if we understand that, then it's easier to understand how to decolonize. And she's starting to explain these steps.
El deseo se coloniza porque necesitamos modernizarnos.
For example,
¿qué es lo que necesitamos para vivir?
For example, desire is colonized because this is linked to the need to be modernized.
For example,
in order to live.
Okay. In this way, we can reflect about it. Okay.
This is one way. This is one example of thinking about.
Thank you. Okay. And the last, si Catherine me permite, necesito hacer una. Bueno, a ver. Tu presentación dejó un silencio, como dice Angélica, y yo lo entiendo como un silencio ontológico. ¿Por qué?
If you allow me, Catherine, I would like to mention something about the silence of your presentation that Angelica made reference to. And for me, this is an ontological silence.
Porque nos está mostrando un panorama desolador que no atañe solamente a América Latina, sino que es el planeta entero y es
lo que está en juego es la vida. Entonces, ni modo.
Your presentation is a little bit sad. Yeah, it provokes sadness because it projects a very difficult situation, not only in South America, but I can say in the rest of the world, that is in relation to the struggle against life itself.
Okay. But, me voy a hacer un comentario epistemológico de tu trabajo, que creo que lo podemos compartir aquí, y es que para poder mostrar esto, tenemos que estar conectados en nuestras investigaciones con el optimismo de la gente. Eso es paradójico, ¿no?
And therefore, I would like to make an epistemological comment here. In order to be able to show this desolation, we also need to be connected to the optimism of the people with whom we work.
Voy a traer unas palabras que cita Arturo Escobar de Cornel West, un intelectual afroamericano.
I'm going to share with you some words that Arturo Escobar quotes from Cornel West, an African intellectual that I would like to share with you. Afro-American intellectual that I want to share with you.
He said, cuando estamos abajo, bueno, no voy a decir jodido, cuando estamos mal.
He said, when we are deep down there,
no podemos darnos el lujo de no ser optimistas.
We cannot deny us the luxury of being optimist.
Okay. Y ya con esto termino. Entonces, es para poder mostrar esto, como investigadora no te puedes dar el lujo de no tener esperanza, ¿no? Tener una política de la esperanza, como dicen Gibson y Graham. Entonces, el silencio empieza a disiparse ahí. ¿Sí? Gracias.
So my contribution to this presentation is that as a researcher, in order to deal with this, you cannot deny the luxury of showing the optimism of the people when you are working. This is the silence that I wanted to address. This is the politics of hope that is actually mentioned by Catherine Gibson and Julie Graham in their work on feminism. Okay. And she says, thank you.
Good. So now to return to the dynamic that we had yesterday in a certain way, and to try to be equal with the possibility of giving the voice to the people who are discussing with us. So first I want to invite John to continue this debate that we already started. The questions you could have right now to Catherine, even the expression of what you felt when you heard to Catherine, and how can you make bridges or not with this kind of way of thinking and this decolonial paradigm. So for us it's a privilege that John is here. John was our professor in the first semester of the PhD, and we start rethinking about all our paradigms with him. And we had a session about the postmodernism and the decolonial thinkers. We read something from Grossvogel, no? And
yeah.
And but I feel there is much more, but we couldn't talk about it. Of course, there are backgrounds and different traditions and different ways of thinking behind that. So now we can update the debate, and I'm really curious about your position to this concrete and embodied knowledge and experience from the colonial paradigms. So, yes.
Fine, thank you, Angelica. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to sit here. I know that means most of you are seeing the back of my head, but I'm very happy just to sit here because I want to be very much part of the group rather than stand up the front and appear to have authority. Because I'm going to respond very simply to Catherine, which is delightful, well done, I loved it, I empathise with it. So in a way, I don't have questions, I have congratulations, but I'll let that sit. But what I really want to pick up on is what I've been hearing in the subsequent contributions, which I think has been absolutely fascinating at a whole lot of different levels. I hope we are recording this, are we? Yes. Great. Well, I think this should definitely be turned into a transcript, and if it doesn't sound too arrogant, I'd be very happy to provide a commentary to the transcripts of all the statements we've had, because I think it really does bring out so many fascinating questions about being a doctoral student in the development field. Absolutely fascinating in all kinds of ways. So I'm going to keep myself very simple now, because I'm hoping perhaps we'll produce a written document that will be shared with everybody and will allow a commentary a longer dialogue to take place. Okay. I mean, I'm delighted to say that Catherine's presentation, it's not mainstream in development research, but it's very acceptable in development research. And that's been a revolution that's been brought about by struggle over the last 10 or 15 years. I think if Catherine had been standing up giving this presentation 15 years ago, people would have just said, oh, you know, this is nothing to do with us. Now everybody in this institute, from the hardest hardline quantitative economist to the most way out rights postmodernist, are all, in a sense, would have to acknowledge this is a legitimate questions to be asked within development research. We've heard a lot about insecurity, anxiety, puzzles, all kinds of, and I know you're all, I know most of you, probably all of you are feeling that at the moment, and I just want to be at this moment reassuring. What you're saying is real, it is a real experience, you are at this moment in time, at this part of your life, you've chosen to, and remember you chose to, locate yourself within an academic research environment. I think I'm probably talking about everybody here. If I'm not, then I apologise to those who are not in that position. That means you do have to make certain kinds of choices. Yeah? Being in a university means you do have to make some choices. What I suggest to you, and this is where the bridging analogy will be useful, I think, is when you feel yourself standing making a choice, think about it as if you were crossing a river. Think about where you're standing at the moment and what is the difference that you're grappling with, that you want to cross over to. I mean, I think all research gets caught in the division between, okay, you've found all this out, so what? Okay, what does it mean? What does it mean for action? And the other end is I've become a virtual consultant to the powerful. Okay? Catherine's giving us a new road to pursue that, but that is always that's always a challenge. Once you've decided what the bridge looks like, whether it's steel, whether it's rope, decide how far you want to cross it. Just because it's a bridge doesn't mean you have to go all the way across. You can stop halfway, you don't even need to put a foot on the bridge. But once you know what the bridge is, once you know the difference you're trying to negotiate, you can then you'll be in a better position to make a decision. I'm now going to say something really very, very practical. I've become increasingly aware over the last, in fact, I've been part of that change myself, over the last 15 years, everybody who's doing development research, and I don't care how quantitative it is, should do a course in ethnography. I think it's methodologically desirable. I'm also willing to push and say that I think that everybody who's doing doctoral research in development should also do a course on discourse analysis as well. That is, we should be multi-method now. Okay? I've supervised so many PhDs where people, and the standard structure will be, okay, in chapter 2, I'm going to try and deal with the material reality of things I'm looking at. The maps, yeah, the maps are material reality. Yes, they claim to show us where mines are, they claim to show us where soya beans are being grown. These are, in a sense, parts of the material reality. And then having negotiated that, having taken a position with respect to that, then moved on to do a much more ethnographic case study, much more local, much more listening to people talk about what they're experiencing in that context. And of course, that's what ethnography does. It makes you very aware of context. It values difference. It doesn't seek the kind of universal statements that Catherine was rightly saying that is often being driven into us by the notion of science. It does value context, it values language. And here's my last practical point. If you're working across language, signal that you are working across language. Put in lots of quotes, lots of statements in the language in which you collected the observations, as well as if you're what language you're required to use for your thesis. Signal clearly. It's a sign of your strength to show that you've been working across language. So I think having a Spanish intervention was wonderful, because that really brings out that point, that we should be proud of our mother tongue. We should be happy in whatever language our research people are using, and then translate across. But signal clearly to your readers that you are working across languages. And if you're working in Latin America among indigenas, be very, very cautious about claiming that Spanish is their language. That's just a very practical thing to say in this context. Yeah? Okay, I hope that helps. It's meant to be affirmative, it's meant to be positive. The dilemmas you're facing are real. The image of bridging might help you deal with those dilemmas and be ready to multi-method yourselves over time.
Thank you, John. Rosalba.
I don't know now what to say. Let me just say again that I'm very empathic. I feel empathy to so many of the things that I have been hearing, not only because I was a PhD student in...
maybe because that part of the audience
in
see.
Because I was in a PhD situation in my life, in a very strange place called academia, in a very strange language called English. So the first thing that comes to my mind, this was something that I was not thinking to say, but after what has happening and what John has been saying here, the first thing that comes to my mind in order to build bridges is the word translation. Maybe research is translation of worlds, of ways of being, of ways of confronting developmental interventions, of ways of conceiving which is a place of a community, of a society, of women, in the world. But again, here comes my critical side on the issue of development. Translation and the bridges that we cross are not neutral. So yes, let's be celebratory about this translation, but be very aware that translation in many cases implies epistemic erasures of denying what is that supposedly reality that we are understanding, and in the process of bringing into languages that are not ours, we sometimes deny the power and the meanings that are attached to that. And how this is happening, from my experience, by taking away place in the way that Catherine was just sharing with us. Now, how to bring back place? I think that one of the ways that, one ways in which actually has been offered us now was through the translation that I tried to do about what Juliana was saying just recently. It's about devastation. It's about, in many corners of the world, it's about abject poverty. We know that. We have feel it. Probably we have also experienced or oppression or discrimination. I was just sharing with somebody about patriarchal families in Latin America and being very attached to experiences of oppression because of that personal experience. So it's something that is not far away from us, but is traveling with us during the PhD in the process of writing. But by being attentive to these spaces in which there is a constant battle for life or against oppression, against discrimination, then one has to be very aware of what Juliana was saying, of hope, of happiness, of the politics of hope. I think that that's the specific concept that captures everything that can actually help us to understand that that translation has also political meaning to destabilize some of the theories and these perspectives in which we are trying to do research within, outside, against development. That will be my first very personal and coming from my guts comment. The second one, it's very much related to what Catherine was saying and also to personal experience, of course. I think that it's very important, Catherine, to realize academia as a place. Because once we realize that it's a place, a building here in The Hague or where you are studying, but that is also a place with history, with a particular genealogy, with a particular project, then this is my personal experience, one feel less trapped, because then we can understand this is a stage in my life, this is a language that probably now I'm forced to manage to some extent in this place. Is if I go and travel to another place, and then I will have to learn the language in order to ask where is the toilet. When here, where you're in academia, you're also confronted to learning how to express, how to incorporate concepts, how to manage concepts. But then, as John was, and here's the bridging, John is saying this is a stage in your life. It's a very difficult one, sometimes a dehumanizing, but it's very much attached to a place in time and to a place in history that is the modern conception of what a university is supposed to be. So I think that what Catherine was saying about academia as a place repoliticized it as a side of a struggle, but also gives it its dimension in the line of our personal stories, but also in the project that it is or is supposed to be. And then we can confront that project from within the academia with particular ways of understanding what is supposed to be knowledge about, if it's more important to be in these debates of knowledge or bringing water and sanitation to communities in despair, or actually to ask ourselves why we tend to prioritize these two, from my point of view, important and relevant topics that can only come together. But anyway, the other thing that I really want to comment on is, and this is just following on what I have just been mentioning, I love your metaphor of the bungee. Because I was in many times confronted when I was supposed to go back home to do research in Mexico with this idea of my colleagues, my supervisors, be careful, it's Mexico City. And I was like, okay, I lived there for 25 years, but okay, thank you, I appreciate your concern. But this also has another dimension, is this idea that we have also discussed here in ISS with my colleague Larissa, but also with Angelica, this idea of field work, going into the wild, going into the local, and really capturing this sense of the Western, of something that is going to be dangerous, that is going to be exotic, that is going to be full of, I don't know, where this idea is coming from and how you can relate to this concept is also related to the genealogy that I was talking about what academia is supposed to be. But also re-signify it. Try to re-signify it, and this is a conversation that we also have, Angelica, Larissa, and myself. Fieldwork is also related to the notion, at least in Spanish, to the work that you do in the field, to touch the ground, to get dirty, to really know that people is not only very happily sitting in a desk trying to understand the world, but there are many important other ways of struggling for that world that one is thinking about. So I think that despite the project that universities are, by re-signifying them and within them our research projects as places with a particular history, with a particular, let's say, notion of what is supposed to be knowledge or solid knowledge or scientific knowledge, from my point of view, after what I have been hearing these 2 days, there is a space, this is the place we call academia, it's also a place of a struggle. So it's not only to say, I reject this mainstream, but also how can I appropriate through my research and re-signify some of the terms that I'm forced to use in my research in order to bring all these experiences and bring in all these voices, not in an extractive and, let's say, instrumental way, as traditionally we are told to do.
Yeah,
if we are
Rosalba,
supposed to be
and
objective.
this
But I
place
will leave it
is
there.
calling us for the time. So,
And that was my last comment. So
okay.
it's okay.
And then yes, have you finished? Yeah, I just got it. Yeah? Okay. The last short comments, reactions to end this endless dialogue and conversation. Yeah.
Well, first I want to thank everybody for your reflective comments, because that was my goal, to provoke and to get us all thinking and to move, because uncomfort, discomfort is part of the process, and it's what academia doesn't teach us, that we're supposed to not feel that. And so part of my goal today was to bring that present and make us think about it, and think about it not just in the issues that I intended to bring to the fore, but in your own work as well. In that sense, and because of time, there isn't the possibility to respond to some of the concrete questions. Maybe we can talk about that outside with coffee in a less formal place, although we've been trying to make this informal. But I also want to go back to the issue of research. Something that John brought up, something that Rosalba brought up, and that obviously, as doctoral students, it's all extremely key for you. The methodology we choose is also a pedagogical process. That I think something that the pedagogue, the Brazilian pedagogue Paulo Freire said a number of years ago, is that pedagogies are indispensable methodologies, right? When we assume a particular way of doing research, right, not just to get data, but really to begin to intervene, not with the folks necessarily or just with the folks we might work with, but with ourselves. And so I think it's important to think about what are those kinds of pedagogical questions that one has to ask oneself when you initiate a research endeavor, when you finish a research endeavor, and along the different places of the bridges in the process. Is it simply to complete what you have to complete to do the PhD? That's certainly an option. Or is it part of a broader pedagogical, epistemological, and maybe even political pedagogy and endeavor to try and better understand the world and to make a difference? And so yes, academia is one place where we struggle to make that difference. Academia shouldn't be isolated from the struggles of the world. They should be here, and we should feel them. And that's sometimes part of the hard process to take into account. So in my final words for this moment, what I would like to challenge us to think about are not just the bridges or just the bridgings, but what kinds of crossroads are possible. And we might get to that crossroad and feel very confused and very uncomfortable and not know which direction to go in. But that's what a crossroads is about. It's allowing those different places to come together, allowing us to show that confusion, that emotion, that uncertainty, because research is always about uncertainty. There are no truths. There are no simple truths. And what does it mean to reside within those crossroads? So as Jackie Alexander says, maybe we need a new compass. Maybe we need new allies in that process that we can share with. But to assume that as part of the research endeavor, I think is important. Because research itself is search. To search for something, but search for something not simply to produce a doctoral dissertation, but to really make a difference. Make a difference in ourselves and make a difference in the world that we inhabit in. And I think that sense of politics of hope is very present. But sometimes to get to the politics of hope, we have to bring up the emotions and the process and the embodiment that academia tells us to keep out. So let's hope that that conversation continues.
Thank you very much. So, and before leaving the room, here with the Chi and Tamara, we want to invite John, Rosalba, and Catherine, and to hear some words from Chi.
Oh my gosh. This is a little bit impromptu. I had goosebumps since yesterday. I'm totally overwhelmed with all the, I will never look at bridges in the same way ever again. And I probably will stand in front of bridges quite a bit of time, and I'm referring to real physical bridges rather than, for sure, before I cross the ISS bridge today, I probably stand there and observe again and reflect. Our appreciation, and I think I can say it on behalf of all the volunteers of the organizing committee and most, for sure, the audiences, probably, that we thank you so much, John, Catherine, Rosalba, and Angelica. You guys play a critical part, each of you, in building up a dynamic that allow us to really reflect in this process, which many of us feel really lonely, and sometimes it became a grinding process, and we can't forget, okay, why did we decide to invest 5 years of our life in this process again? Is it just to produce a 2-word letter, or is a 3 words actually, yeah? And is it just to print a volume that's stuck on a shelf in the library somewhere? Our grandmother just showed, the title of the page. So, with your ending remark, suddenly I realized, yes, this is why most of us do this. So thank you very much for all of you for invoking, provoking, get us to reflect on the importance of this journey that we call the PhD of research. And to, again, I think all of you, what you did is, for me at least, to put us into a space where we, again, think about ourselves as learner of life and a learner with people. And I think this is very, very important. So on that note, being overwhelmed.
And thanks to Chi, thanks to you, she gave us the floor. It was her idea to do this 2 days. I was, are you crazy? I was 2 days talking the same people. But then we have to connect things, no? We have to try to have. So thanks to you for give us the chance to start the conversation, and thanks to all of you for joining us in this trying.
Actually, something just came up while you guys were talking, and this is totally just came up. I know we're late, but 2 seconds. Is that there seems to be a desire to continue the conversation after the conference, right? So I was thinking, with what John was saying, maybe we can create a LinkedIn account, huh? And it's like a social network account. Well, that all you have to do is just sign up using your email. So in there we can create a forum where we collectively can continue this conversation, and we can post the materials from the conference. Everything is recorded, so you can just pick a point and then start a discussion because it's kind of impossible to have all of us together all the time. So in this way, virtual world allow us to do this. Good idea? Okay.
Okay, before she give our token of appreciations to our keynote speakers and discussants, I would like to remind you, please do not leave the room yet. I have some announcements to make before. Thank you. Thank you. I hope you wouldn't mind that we would have a very short break for coffee after a very fruitful discussion. After this, we're going, after the coffee break, we're going straight to the parallel panels. That's why I have several announcements to make for the rest of the day. First of all, we would have 4 panels on the first round before lunchtime, and then 4 other panels after the lunch break. During the coffee break, those who was not here yesterday and would like to have the program, you can go to the registration area right in front of this door and get the program from there. And for the presenters, because we have a very short coffee break, you can give your USB stick with your presentations right there in the room, and the chairperson will help you to upload it there. And after the coffee break, we go straight to the parallel panels. The coffee break, the coffee will be served at the atrium, first floor, where we had our lunch and dinner. And lunch will also be served at the atrium. The lunch will start at 1 o'clock. And after lunch, we go straight to the second parallel panel. At 3:35, we have a session, a participatory reflections, that will be facilitated by Lenka and Maria. This session will take place at the atrium upstairs, where we have our lunch at 3:35. This is a very important part of our conference, because this is where we are going to reflect on the processes that we've been through in the last 2 days. And related to that, we still have our development dialogue mailbox at this place, and probably at the coffee break place at the atrium. And after that, we are going to wrap up the whole development dialogue process during the closing remarks. And of course, if you still have things to discuss and questions, we will still have some time at the butterfly bar after for some drinks and great discussions. Thank you. I hope you would enjoy the rest of the conference. Have a nice day.